The blood on Lucia Reyes's hands wouldn't wash away, no matter how hard she scrubbed them in the cold water of the creek, and she knew in her heart that the stain would follow her forever, even though she had only been trying to save her father's life when she pulled that trigger. The year was 1876, and the Arizona Territory was as unforgiving as the desert sun that beat down on the small town of Seligman. Lucia had arrived 3 days ago on the stagecoach, her few belongings clutched in a worn carpetbag, her heart heavy with grief and guilt. Her father had died anyway, despite her desperate attempt to defend him from the men who'd come to their ranch in Texas, demanding money he didn't have. The bullet she'd fired had found its mark in one of the attackers, and though the law had called it justified, the whispers in town had driven her away. A woman who could kill, they'd said, even in defense, was not a woman to be trusted. She'd heard that Seligman needed workers, that the railroad expansion meant opportunity, that perhaps she could disappear into the dusty anonymity of a frontier town and start over. But 3 days of knocking on doors had taught her that even here, a woman alone with shadows in her eyes was viewed with suspicion. The boarding house keeper had taken one look at her trembling hands and downcast gaze and told her they had no rooms. The general store owner had said he needed no help. The saloon keeper had offered her work, but the look in his eyes had told her exactly what kind of work he meant, and she'd fled before he could say another word. Now she sat by the creek on the outskirts of town, her hands raw from scrubbing, her stomach empty, and her hope nearly gone. The sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of orange and red that reminded her too much of blood and fire. She had perhaps $2 left to her name, and nowhere to sleep except under the stars. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up, startled. A man on a gray horse was approaching, silhouetted against the dying light. Lucia quickly stood, grabbing her carpetbag, ready to run if necessary. She'd learned in her 22 years that a woman alone was vulnerable, especially out here where the law was thin and justice often came from the barrel of a gun. But the man who dismounted was not the rough drifter she'd feared. He was tall, perhaps 30 years old, with sandy brown hair that touched his collar and eyes that were a startling blue even in the fading light. He wore dusty work clothes and boots that had seen better days, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who belonged to this harsh land. "Evening," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was deep and measured with a hint of warmth that surprised her. "Didn't mean to startle you. Saw you from the ridge and wanted to make sure you were all right. Not safe for anyone to be out here alone after dark." Lucia clutched her bag tighter and looked at the ground. "I'm fine, thank you." "Are you?" He took a step closer and she instinctively took a step back. He stopped immediately, holding up his hands. "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you. Name's Austin Garrett. I own the ranch about 5 miles west of here. You look like you could use some help." "I don't need charity," Lucia said, her voice barely above a whisper. She still couldn't meet his eyes. The shame of her circumstances, of what she'd done, of what she'd become, weighed on her like stones. "Wasn't offering charity," Austin said mildly. "Was offering work if you're willing. My housekeeper left last month to live with her daughter in California, and the place is falling apart without her. I can't pay much, but you'd have room and board, 3 meals a day, and honest work. No strings attached." Lucia's heart leaped at the offer, but suspicion quickly followed. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" "Because you look like you need it and I need the help. Simple as that." He paused and his voice softened. "And because I know what it's like to be alone in the world with nowhere to turn. Someone gave me a chance once. Figure it's time I paid that forward." She wanted to accept. God, how she wanted to accept. But the shame of what she'd done, The blood on her hands that she could still feel even though it was long gone made her feel unworthy of kindness. "You don't know anything about me." "That's true," Austin agreed. "But I'm a good judge of character and I can see you're running from something." "Most folks out here are running from something. Question is, are you running toward something better or are you just running?" Lucia finally looked up, just for a moment, and found herself caught by the genuine concern in his eyes. She looked away quickly, her cheeks flushing. "I want something better," she whispered, "but I don't know if I deserve it." "Everyone deserves a chance at better," Austin said firmly. "Now, are you going to take me up on my offer, or are you planning to sleep out here with the coyotes and rattlesnakes?" Despite everything, Lucia felt a small smile tug at her lips. "When you put it that way, I suppose I don't have much choice." "There's always a choice," Austin said, "but I'm hoping you'll choose to give yourself a chance." He walked back to his horse and untied a canteen from the saddle. "Here. You look thirsty." Lucia took the canteen with trembling hands and drank deeply. The water was cool and sweet, the best thing she'd tasted in days. When she handed it back, she managed to look at him again just briefly. "Thank you, Mr. Garrett." "Austin," he corrected. "And you are Lucia." "Lucia Reyes." "Well, Miss Reyes, how about we get you back to the ranch? There's stew left from dinner, and you can have your pick of the spare rooms. We'll talk about the work details in the morning when you've had some rest." The ride to the Garrett ranch was quiet. Austin had helped her onto his horse and walked alongside, leading the animal with easy familiarity. Lucia sat stiffly in the saddle, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and uncertain situation. The desert night had fallen completely now, and the stars overhead were so bright they seemed close enough to touch. In the distance, a coyote howled and Lucia shivered despite the lingering warmth in the air. The ranch house appeared gradually out of the darkness, a sturdy adobe structure with a wooden porch that wrapped around two sides. There was a barn nearby, and several corrals that Lucia could just make out in the starlight. It was modest but well-maintained, the kind of place that spoke of hard work and honest living. Austin helped her down from the horse with careful hands, as if she were something fragile that might break. "Go on inside," he said. "I'll tend to the horse and be in shortly." Lucia climbed the porch steps and pushed open the front door. The interior was lit by a single lamp on a table, and she could see that Austin had been telling the truth about needing a housekeeper. The main room was cluttered with papers, books, and various ranch supplies. Dirty dishes were stacked on a sideboard, and dust covered most surfaces. But despite the mess, there was something warm and welcoming about the space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and comfortable-looking furniture was arranged in a way that suggested someone had once cared deeply about making this a home. She set down her carpetbag and stood uncertainly in the middle of the room, unsure what to do with herself. The smell of the promised stew made her stomach growl, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since the day before. Austin came in a few minutes later, stamping dust from his boots at the door. "Kitchen's through here," he said, leading her to a room at the back of the house. Like the main room, it was cluttered and dirty, but there was a large stove and a pot sitting on it that still gave off warmth. He ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of her at the kitchen table. "It's probably cold by now, but it's filling." Lucia ate slowly, trying not to appear too desperate even though she wanted to wolf down every bite. The stew was simple, meat and vegetables in a rich broth, but it was the best meal she'd had in weeks. Austin sat across from her with his own bowl, eating in comfortable silence. When she'd finished, he showed her to a small room off the main hallway. It had a bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the desert. "Bathrooms down the hall," he said. "There's fresh water in the pitcher on the dresser, and clean linens in the chest at the foot of the bed if you need them. Sleep as long as you like in the morning. We'll talk about everything else when you're rested." "Mr. Garrett," Lucia began, finally finding the courage to look at him directly. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Austin leaned against the doorframe and considered her question. "My mother used to say that kindness isn't something you ration out like flour in a drought. It's something you give freely because that's what makes us human. She was a wise woman, my mother. Died when I was 17, but her words stuck with me." "I'm sorry for your loss," Lucia said softly. "It was 13 years ago now. The pain gets easier, but you never forget." He straightened up. "Good night, Miss Reyes. Welcome to the Garrett Ranch." After he left, Lucia sat on the edge of the bed and let herself cry for the first time since leaving Texas. She cried for her father, for the man she'd killed, for the life she'd lost, and for the unexpected kindness of a stranger who'd offered her a lifeline when she'd been drowning. When the tears finally stopped, she washed her face in the basin, changed into her only nightgown, and slipped between the clean sheets. Within minutes, exhausted in body and soul, she was asleep. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee. Lucia woke disoriented, forgetting for a moment where she was. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back, and she sat up quickly, wondering if she'd overslept. The light streaming through the window was bright, suggesting it was well past dawn. She dressed quickly in her other dress, a faded blue calico that had seen better days, and braided her long dark hair. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Austin in the kitchen, frying eggs on the stove. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "Hope you like your eggs scrambled." "I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage breakfast. Please let me do that," Lucia said, moving forward. "You've been kind enough already. The least I can do is cook." Austin stepped aside willingly. "Won't hear any argument from me. The spatula is all yours." Lucia took over at the stove, and it felt good to have something useful to do. She finished the eggs, added some salt and pepper from containers she found on a shelf, and plated them efficiently. There was bread that was only slightly stale, and she cut thick slices and toasted them on the stove. They ate together at the kitchen table, and Austin explained the situation. "The ranch is about 200 acres. I run cattle, about 100 head right now. I've got 2 ranch hands, Miguel and his son Carlos, who help with the heavy work. They have a cabin about a mile south of here. Miguel's wife, Rosa, used to help in the house sometimes, but she's got arthritis bad in her hands now, so she can't do much anymore." "What would you need me to do?" Lucia asked. "Cooking, cleaning, laundry, that sort of thing." "Sometimes helping with the chickens and the vegetable garden, though I'll admit the garden's more weeds than vegetables right now. Whatever needs doing to keep the household running. Like I said, room and board plus $15 a month. It's not much, but it's honest work." $15 was more than Lucia had hoped for. "That's more than fair, Mr. Garrett." "Austin," he reminded her gently, "we're not formal folks out here, and there's one more thing I need to make clear. You're an employee, not a servant. You're entitled to respect and decency, and if you ever feel uncomfortable or unsafe, you tell me immediately." "Understood," Lucia nodded, surprised by his directness. "Understood. Good. Now I've got to ride out and check on the herd. Miguel and Carlos are mending fence in the north pasture. You can start wherever you feel comfortable. I'll be back around noon." After Austin left, Lucia stood in the middle of the kitchen and surveyed her new domain. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. She had purpose now, something to focus on besides her guilt and fear. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By the time Austin returned at midday, she'd washed all the dishes, swept and mopped the kitchen floor, and started on the main room. The clutter had been organized, the surfaces dusted, and the windows open to let in fresh air. She'd also found a chicken coop behind the house and gathered eggs, which were now sitting in a basket on the now clean kitchen counter. Austin stopped in the doorway and stared. "Did you do all this in one morning?" Lucia, who was on her hands and knees scrubbing the floor, looked up briefly before returning her attention to the stubborn stain she was working on. "There's still a lot more to do. The bedroom needs attention, and the bathroom, and I haven't even started on the laundry." "Miss Reyes, you don't have to do everything in one day." He sounded amused and concerned in equal measure. "I need to earn my keep," she said quietly, still not meeting his eyes. Austin crouched down beside her, and Lucia tensed. He didn't touch her, but his presence was close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "You earned your keep just by accepting my offer. You don't have to work yourself to death to prove your worth." "I'm just doing the job you hired me for," Lucia said, scrubbing harder at the stain. "The job I hired you for doesn't include destroying your hands. Look at me." When she didn't immediately comply, his voice softened. "Please, Lucia." Slowly, reluctantly, she raised her eyes to his. Austin studied her face for a long moment, and Lucia felt heat rise in her cheeks. She knew what he saw. A plain woman with haunted eyes and too much sadness for someone her age. But what Austin said surprised her. "You have beautiful eyes. They're the color of whiskey in firelight. And you're working so hard you're going to make yourself sick. Take a break, have some lunch with me." Lucia looked away quickly, her heart pounding. "I'm not beautiful, and I need to finish this floor." "The floor can wait. Your health can't." He stood and offered her his hand. "Come on. Let's see what we can make for lunch with those eggs you gathered." Reluctantly, Lucia took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. His hand was calloused and strong, the hand of a man who worked with them every day. But his touch was gentle, and he released her as soon as she was standing. Over the next few weeks, Lucia fell into a routine. She rose early, prepared breakfast for Austin, and then spent the day restoring order to the ranch house. It was satisfying work, and she took pride in the transformation. The house began to look like a home again, with clean floors and windows, fresh linens, and meals that were more than just adequate. Austin was an easy person to work for. He was respectful, kept his distance, and seemed genuinely grateful for everything she did. He often worked from dawn until dusk, riding out to tend the cattle or mend fences or deal with any of the 100 other tasks that came with running a ranch. Sometimes, Miguel and Carlos would join them for meals, and Lucia found herself enjoying the company. Miguel was a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a ready smile. Carlos was younger, perhaps 25, and engaged to a girl in town named Elena. But despite the pleasant routine, Lucia remained guarded. She spoke when spoken to, worked hard, and kept to herself. She still couldn't shake the shame of what she'd done. The memory of the guns recoil in her hands, the look on the man's face when her bullet struck him. She knew Austin had noticed her reticence, but he never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give. One evening, about a month after her arrival, Lucia was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard raised voices from outside. She looked out the window to see Austin talking to two men on horses. The men were rough-looking, with guns on their hips and mean expressions on their weathered faces. Lucia's blood ran cold. They looked like the kind of men her father had dealt with, the kind who took what they wanted and damned the consequences. She moved closer to the window, straining to hear. "I'm telling you, Garrett, you're sitting on valuable land here," one of the men was saying. "Mr. Sullivan is prepared to make you a generous offer." "And I'm telling you, Warner, that this land isn't for sale," Austin replied, his voice hard. "I've told Sullivan that 3 times now. How many times do I have to say it?" "Sullivan doesn't like taking no for an answer," the other man said. You'd be smart to reconsider. Is that a threat? Austin's hand moved closer to his own gun. Warner held up his hands in mock innocence. Just friendly advice. You're out here all alone. Accidents happen on ranches. Be a shame if something happened to you or your property. Get off my land, Austin said coldly. And tell Sullivan if he sends you back here, I'll be reporting him to the marshal. The men laughed, but they turned their horses and rode away. Austin stood watching them until they were out of sight, then turned back to the house. His expression was thunderous. Lucia moved away from the window quickly, her heart racing. When Austin came inside, she was stirring a pot at the stove, trying to look as if she hadn't witnessed anything. Sorry about that, Austin said, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. Nothing for you to worry about, just some business dispute. Those men look dangerous, Lucia said quietly. They're all bark and no bite. Horace Sullivan has been trying to buy my land for years. He owns most of the property around here and wants to build some kind of cattle empire. But this ranch has been in my family for 2 generations. I'm not selling. What if they make good on their threats? Austin smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then I'll deal with it. I'm not afraid of Sullivan or his hired men. Lucia wanted to say more, to warn him about what men like that were capable of, but she couldn't find the words. Instead, she dished up dinner and they ate in tense silence. That night, Lucia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the look on those men's faces, the casual way they'd threatened Austin. She knew from bitter experience how quickly such situations could escalate. Her father had ignored similar warnings, confident that right and justice would prevail. He'd been wrong, and it had cost him his life. Around midnight, she heard a sound from the front of the house. Her heart leaping into her throat, she grabbed the shawl from the foot of her bed and crept out into the hallway. The house was dark except for a sliver of moonlight coming through the windows. Another sound, like wood creaking. Lucia's hands began to shake. Were Sullivan's men back? Had they come to make good on their threats? She moved silently to the main room and saw a figure standing by the window. She nearly screamed before she realized it was Austin. He was looking out at the dark landscape, his expression troubled. "Austin," she whispered. He turned quickly, reaching for his gun before he recognized her. "Lucia, what are you doing up? I heard something, I thought." She trailed off, feeling foolish. "You thought someone was breaking in." It wasn't a question. He could read it on her face. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake you, I just couldn't sleep." Lucia moved closer, forgetting for a moment to keep her distance. "You're worried about those men." "A bit," Austin admitted. "Sullivan is persistent and he has money and influence in town, but I've dealt with men like him before. I'll handle it." "My father said the same thing," Lucia said before she could stop herself. Austin turned to look at her fully. "Your father." Lucia wrapped the shawl tighter around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm night. She hadn't meant to say anything, hadn't meant to open that door. But the words were out now, and she found she couldn't stop them from coming. "Men came to our ranch in Texas. They said my father owed them money. He said he didn't, that he'd paid his debts. They didn't believe him. They came one night with guns." Her voice was barely above a whisper now, and she stared at the floor, unable to look at Austin. "I tried to stop them. There was a gun, my father's rifle. I grabbed it. I didn't even think. I just fired." "Lucia," Austin said gently. "I killed him," she continued, the words tumbling out now in a rush. "One of the men, I shot him and he died. They said it was justified that I was defending my father, but it didn't matter. My father died anyway from the beating they gave him before I got the gun, and I had to live with knowing I'd taken a life and it hadn't even saved him." "That's why you came here," Austin said. "Why you were alone by the creek." Lucia nodded, still unable to meet his eyes. "I couldn't stay in Texas. Everyone looked at me differently. I could see it in their faces. They were afraid of me, or they pitied me, or they thought I was some kind of fallen woman because I'd done something no proper lady should do. So I left. But I can't outrun what I did. I see it every time I close my eyes. I feel the blood on my hands even when they're clean. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She turned away, ashamed of her weakness, ashamed of everything. Austin moved closer, and Lucia heard his footsteps on the wooden floor. "May I touch you?" he asked softly. The question surprised her so much that she looked up at him through her tears. His face was gentle, understanding, and completely lacking in judgment. "I just want to help," he said, "but only if you're comfortable with it." Lucia nodded, not trusting her voice. Austin reached out and gently placed his hands on her shoulders, turning her to face him. She immediately looked down at the floor again, unable to bear his gaze while she was so vulnerable. "Look at me," Austin said quietly. When she didn't respond, he continued, "Please, Lucia, look at me." "I can't," she whispered. "I'm too ashamed. You'll see what I am, what I've done." "I already know what you've done, you told me, and it doesn't change anything." "How can you say that? I killed a man." "You defended your father," Austin corrected firmly. "There's a difference. You acted in a moment of fear and desperation to protect someone you loved. That doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you human." "But I failed," Lucia said, her voice breaking. "He died anyway." "And that's a tragedy, but it's not your fault. You did everything you could. You were brave in a moment when most people would have frozen. You have nothing to be ashamed of." Lucia shook her head, still looking at the floor. Austin was quiet for a moment, then she felt one of his hands leave her shoulder. His fingers, calloused but gentle, touched her chin. "Let me see your face," he said softly. "Please." Slowly, reluctantly, she let him lift her face until she was looking at him. His blue eyes were full of warmth, and something else she couldn't quite identify. He studied her face for a long moment, and Lucia felt herself trembling under his gaze. She waited for the judgment, the disgust, the fear she'd seen in so many other faces. But what Austin said was, "I see a woman who's been through hell and came out the other side. I see courage and strength and resilience. I see someone who's so much stronger than she knows." He paused, and his voice became even softer. "And I see beauty. So much beauty, Lucia, both inside and out." Lucia felt as if she couldn't breathe. No one had ever looked at her the way Austin was looking at her now, as if she were something precious and worthy of care. "You don't see me clearly," she whispered. "You can't." "I see you better than you see yourself," Austin replied. He used his thumb to gently wipe away one of her tears. "You've been carrying this weight all alone, haven't you? Believing that you're somehow tainted or damaged or less than you were before." Lucia nodded, unable to speak. "You're not," Austin said firmly. "You're a survivor. You're strong and capable and good. What happened to you was terrible, but it didn't break you. You're still here. You're still fighting. That takes more courage than most people will ever have." "I don't feel courageous," Lucia admitted. "I feel scared all the time." Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. You've been doing that every day since you got here. His hand moved from her chin to cup her cheek, and Lucia found herself leaning into the touch despite herself. "I'm honored that you trusted me enough to tell me the truth. I didn't mean to tell you, it just came out. I'm glad it did. You shouldn't have to carry that burden alone." Austin's expression became more serious. "And I want you to know that you're safe here. I won't let anyone hurt you." "I promise." "You can't promise that," Lucia said. "Those men today, Sullivan's men, they're dangerous. You saw how they threatened you. And I meant what I said. I can handle them. I've been dealing with men like that my whole life. They're bullies, and bullies back down when you stand up to them." "My father stood up to them," Lucia said quietly. "It didn't save him." Austin's jaw tightened. I'm sorry that happened to your father. Truly I am, but I'm not going to live my life in fear of what might happen, and neither should you." He dropped his hand from her face, and Lucia immediately felt the loss of his warmth. "It's late. We should both try to get some sleep." Lucia nodded and started to turn away, but then she paused. "Austin, thank you for listening, for understanding, for not judging me." "There's nothing to judge," Austin said. "You're one of the bravest people I've ever met, Lucia Reyes. I hope someday you'll be able to see that in yourself." That night, for the first time since her father's death, Lucia slept without nightmares. Something had shifted between her and Austin. A bridge built across the distance she'd been keeping between herself and the rest of the world. She wasn't ready to forgive herself for what had happened, but maybe, just maybe, Austin was right. Maybe she was stronger than she'd thought. The next morning, Lucia woke feeling lighter than she had in months. She prepared breakfast with more energy than usual, humming softly to herself as she worked. When Austin came into the kitchen, he smiled at the sound. "That's nice to hear," he said. "You have a pretty voice." Lucia felt herself blush. "I didn't realize I was doing it out loud. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. This house has been too quiet for too long. It's good to hear life in it again." He sat down at the table and accepted the plate of eggs and bacon she set in front of him. "I need to ride into town today for supplies. Would you like to come? It might be good for you to get out of the house for a bit." Lucia's first instinct was to refuse. She'd been avoiding town since that first disastrous day when no one would hire her. But then she thought about what Austin had said the night before, about not living in fear. "Yes," she heard herself say, "I'd like that." The ride into Seligman was pleasant. Austin drove a wagon, and Lucia sat beside him on the bench, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the vast openness of the desert landscape. Austin pointed out various landmarks along the way and told her stories about the area. "That ridge there, that's where I shot my first deer when I was 14, he said, pointing to a rocky outcrop. "My father was so proud he made me tell the story at least a dozen times. And that creek bed, even though it's dry now, it floods something fierce in the spring. Lost a whole wagon to it once, supplies and all." "How long have you lived here?" Lucia asked. "My whole life. My parents came out here in 1850 before I was born. They were part of the first wave of settlers after the Mexican-American War. My father built the ranch from nothing. It was hard going in those days, harder than now even, but they made it work through sheer stubbornness and determination. They sound like remarkable people." They were. "My father died 5 years ago, heart failure. He was only 53, but this land ages you faster than it should. He never regretted it, though. He used to say that a man isn't measured by how long he lives, but by what he builds while he's here." "That's a good philosophy," Lucia said. "I think so. Though I'll admit, there are days when I wonder if I'm building anything or just maintaining what he started. The ranch turns enough profit to keep going, but we're not exactly thriving. Not with men like Sullivan buying up all the good grazing land and trying to push out the smaller ranchers." "Why does he want your land so badly?" Austin was quiet for a moment. "There's a natural spring on my property, one of the few reliable water sources in this area. Without it, his cattle would have to travel farther for water, which means they'd lose weight, which means less profit. He's offered me a good price, I'll give him that. More than the land is probably worth. But it's not about the money, it's about legacy, about keeping what my parents built." Lucia understood that. Her own father had felt the same way about their ranch in Texas. It hadn't saved him, but she respected the sentiment. "I hope you can keep it." "I intend to," Austin said firmly. They arrived in Seligman mid-morning. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with various shops and businesses. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their daily business. Lucia felt self-conscious as they drove down the street, wondering if anyone would recognize her from her first day in town. Austin pulled the wagon up in front of the general store and helped Lucia down. His hands on her waist were warm and strong, and he held on perhaps a moment longer than necessary before releasing her. "I need to talk to the feed store owner about an order," he said. "Why don't you go into the general store and pick up whatever supplies we need for the house? Flour, sugar, coffee, that sort of thing. Put it on my account." Lucia nodded and entered the store. The interior was cool and dim after the bright sunlight, and it took her eyes a moment to adjust. The store was well stocked with everything from dry goods to tools to bolts of fabric. A middle-aged woman stood behind the counter, and she looked up when Lucia entered. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. Her tone was neither friendly nor unfriendly, just businesslike. "I need some supplies for the Garrett ranch," Lucia said quietly. "Austin said to put it on his account." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're working for Austin Garrett?" "Yes, madam. I'm his housekeeper." "Housekeeper," the woman repeated, and there was something in her tone that made Lucia stiffen. She'd heard that tone before, the insinuation that a woman working for a bachelor was doing more than just housekeeping. "Yes," Lucia said firmly, meeting the woman's eyes. "I cook and clean and help maintain the household, nothing more." The woman had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I meant no offense. It's just that Austin has been on his own for so long, it's surprising to hear he's hired someone. What's your name?" "Lucia Reyes." "Well, Miss Reyes, I'm Martha Simmons. My husband owns this store. Now, what do you need?" Lucia gave her list, and Martha gathered the items efficiently. As she worked, she asked casual questions about how Lucia was settling in and what she thought of the ranch. Lucia answered cautiously, not sure if Martha was genuinely interested or just fishing for gossip. As Martha was tallying up the order, the door opened and two women entered. They were well dressed in the fashion of the day, with elaborate hats and bustled skirts. They glanced at Lucia briefly before turning to Martha. "Good morning, Martha," one of them said. "I heard the most interesting news this morning. Someone said Austin Garrett has taken on a woman at his ranch." "That would be Miss Reyes here," Martha said, nodding toward Lucia. "She's his new housekeeper." The two women turned to look at Lucia with undisguised curiosity. "How interesting," the second woman said. "And where are you from, Miss Reyes?" "Texas," Lucia said shortly. "Texas. How exotic. And you came all this way just to keep house for a rancher." There was skepticism in the woman's voice. "I came looking for work, and Mr. Garrett was kind enough to offer me employment," Lucia said, feeling her cheeks heat. She knew what these women were thinking. She'd faced it before. "I'm sure he was," the first woman said with a knowing look. "Austin Garrett is quite the catch. One of the few eligible bachelors left in this territory. I'm sure many women would be interested in keeping house for him." "It's an honest job," Lucia said, her voice hardening. "And Mr. Garrett has been nothing but respectful and proper." "Of course, dear," the woman said in a tone that suggested she didn't believe a word of it. "We meant no offense. It's just that a young woman living alone with a man, even as an employee, is bound to cause talk." "Then perhaps people should mind their own business," Austin's voice came from the doorway. He'd entered without any of them noticing, and his expression was stern. "Miss Reyes is an employee of the Garrett Ranch, nothing more and nothing less, and her character is beyond reproach. I'd appreciate it if you'd remember that, Mrs. Thompson." Mrs. Thompson, the first woman, had the grace to look embarrassed. "Of course, Austin. We were just making conversation." "Then perhaps you should find a different topic," Austin said coldly. He walked over to Lucia and picked up the crate of supplies Martha had prepared. "Ready to go," Lucia nodded, grateful for his intervention but also embarrassed that he'd had to defend her. They left the store together, and Austin loaded the supplies into the wagon in tense silence. "I'm sorry about that," he said finally. "Mrs. Thompson and her friend are notorious gossips. I should have warned you." "It's all right," Lucia said quietly. "I've faced worse. That doesn't make it right." Austin helped her up onto the wagon seat. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said in there. Your character is beyond reproach." "You don't know that," Lucia said. "You don't really know me." "I know enough," Austin said firmly. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. "I know you're honest and hardworking. I know you're brave. And I know those women in there don't have the right to judge you or make insinuations about your morality." They rode in silence for a while, heading back toward the ranch. Lucia was lost in thought, troubled by the encounter. She'd hoped that by taking honest work, by keeping to herself, she could avoid exactly that kind of scrutiny. But it seemed that no matter where she went or what she did, people would always find something to gossip about. "I should leave," she said suddenly. "I'm causing problems for you." "People will talk and it will damage your reputation." "Let them talk," Austin said. "I don't care what people think. But you should. You have to live here, do business here. If people think I'm that we're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "That we're what? Having an improper relationship." Austin pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. "First of all, even if we were, which we're not, it would be nobody's business but ours. Second, my reputation is my own to manage, and I'm not about to let a bunch of busybodies dictate how I live my life. And third, you're not going anywhere unless you want to. But the talk, the gossip, it could hurt you. It could make Sullivan's campaign against you more effective. People might be less likely to support you if they think I'm." She trailed off, her cheeks burning. Austin reached out and took her hand. The gesture was simple but intimate, and Lucia felt her breath catch. "Listen to me," he said seriously. "You are not responsible for other people's small-mindedness. You've done nothing wrong. You're a woman trying to make an honest living, and anyone who has a problem with that can answer to me. I'm not letting you leave because of gossip. Do you understand?" Lucia looked down at their joined hands. Austin's hand was so much larger than hers, scarred and calloused from hard work, but his touch was gentle. "Why do you care so much?" she asked quietly. "Why does it matter to you whether I stay or go?" Austin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because somewhere along the way you stopped being just my housekeeper. You've become important to me. This ranch feels like a home again with you in it. The house is warm and welcoming, yes, but it's more than that. You're easy to talk to, and I find myself looking forward to meals just so I can spend time with you. I'm not ready to lose that yet." Lucia's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Austin could hear it. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to pull her hand away and reinstate the careful distance she'd been maintaining. But a larger part of her wanted to hold on, to accept the connection he was offering. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to let someone in. After everything that happened, after what I did, I feel like I don't deserve, like I'm not worthy of." "Of what? Of kindness, of companionship, of care." Austin squeezed her hand gently. "You are worthy, Lucia, more than worthy, and I'm not asking you for anything you're not ready to give. I just want you to stay, to give this, whatever this is between us, a chance to develop naturally. No pressure, no expectations. Just stay." Lucia looked up at him finally, meeting his blue eyes. She saw sincerity there and warmth and something that made her chest feel tight. "All right," she whispered. "I'll stay." Austin smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less careworn. "Good, that's good." He released her hand and picked up the reins again. "Now let's get these supplies home before the milk goes sour." The rest of the ride back to the ranch was more comfortable. Austin told her funny stories about some of the characters in town, and Lucia found herself laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. It felt good to laugh, to let go of some of the tension and fear that had been her constant companions. Over the following weeks, something shifted between Lucia and Austin. The carefully maintained employer-employee distance began to blur. Austin started lingering at breakfast, talking with her about his plans for the day or asking her opinion on various matters. Lucia found herself cooking his favorite foods and making sure his clothes were mended and pressed. They began taking evening walks together, strolling around the ranch property as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. Miguel and Carlos noticed the change and exchanged knowing looks, but they said nothing. Rosa, Miguel's wife, came to visit one afternoon and spent time with Lucia in the kitchen. She was a warm, grandmotherly woman who spoke broken English but communicated volumes with her kind eyes and gentle manner. "Mr. Austin, he is good man," Rosa said as she helped Lucia prepare dinner. "He needs someone, is lonely too long." "We're just friends," Lucia said, but even to her own ears the protest sounded weak. Rosa smiled knowingly. "It's good to start as friends, but I see how he looks at you, and how you look at him when you think no one watches." Lucia felt her cheeks heat. I'm not, it's not like that." "Why not?" Rosa asked simply. "You are young, he is young, you are both alone. Why not let yourself be happy?" "Because I don't deserve to be happy," Lucia said before she could stop herself. "Not after what I've done." Rosa set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables and turned to face Lucia fully. "What you have done. You work hard. You are a good person. What is there not to deserve happiness?" Lucia found herself telling Rosa the whole story, something she'd sworn she'd never do again. But Rosa's kind, non-judgmental presence made it easy to open up. When she finished, Rosa pulled her into a warm embrace. "My hija," she said softly, "you did what you had to do. You are not bad person. You are survivor. It's time to forgive yourself and let yourself live again." "I don't know if I can," Lucia whispered into Rosa's shoulder. "You can," Rosa said firmly. "And Mr. Austin, he can help you. Let him in. Let yourself be loved." That conversation stayed with Lucia over the following days. She found herself watching Austin when he didn't know she was looking, noticing the way he moved, the sound of his laugh, the gentleness in his eyes when he looked at her. She began to acknowledge, at least to herself, that her feelings for him had grown beyond respect or gratitude. She was falling in love with him, had been falling in love with him probably since that first night when he'd found her by the creek and offered her hope when she'd had none. But acknowledging her feelings and acting on them were two different things. She was still afraid, still convinced that she was somehow tainted by what had happened in Texas. How could she offer her heart to someone when it felt so broken? The decision was taken out of her hands late one night in early October. Lucia woke to the sound of breaking glass. For a moment, she lay frozen in bed, thinking she'd imagined it. Then she heard it again, followed by the whinny of frightened horses from the barn. She threw on her robe and rushed out of her room. Austin was already in the main room, pulling on his boots and buckling his gun belt. "Stay inside," he ordered. "Lock the door behind me." "What's happening?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." He headed for the door. "Austin, wait," Lucia called. "It could be dangerous. You can't go out there alone." "I can't not go. This is my ranch. I have to protect it." He paused at the door and looked back at her. His expression softened slightly. "I'll be careful, I promise." Then he was gone into the night. Lucia stood by the window, her heart in her throat, watching his silhouette move toward the barn. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to see shapes and shadows. She saw Austin reach the barn and disappear inside. A moment later, she heard shouts and the sound of more breaking glass. Unable to stand waiting, Lucia grabbed a lantern and headed out onto the porch. She could see flames now, licking up the side of the barn. Someone had set it on fire. Her blood ran cold. This had to be Sullivan's men making good on their threats. She saw Austin emerge from the barn leading 2 horses, their eyes rolling with fear. He got them to the safety of the corral and ran back toward the barn. That's when Lucia saw the men, 3 of them, carrying torches and cans that she assumed held kerosene or lamp oil. "Austin!" she screamed. "Behind you!" Austin turned just as one of the men swung a piece of wood at his head. He ducked, but not quite fast enough, and the blow caught him on the shoulder, sending him staggering. The man raised the wood again, and Lucia saw red. She didn't think. She ran down the porch steps and across the yard, grabbing the first thing she could find, which happened to be a shovel leaning against the porch. She reached the man just as he was about to strike Austin again and swung the shovel with all her strength, catching him in the ribs. He went down with a grunt of pain. The other 2 men turned toward her, and for a moment, Lucia was back in Texas, facing down the men who'd killed her father. Fear threatened to overwhelm her, but then she felt Austin beside her, and the fear turned to determination. She wasn't going to lose someone else she cared about, not again, not ever. "Get out of here," Austin shouted at the men. He had his gun drawn now, pointed at the closest man. "This is your only warning. Leave now or I'll shoot you for trespassing and arson." Sullivan said. One of the men began. "I don't care what Sullivan said. Get off my land. Now." The men looked at each other, then at Austin's gun, then at Lucia with her shovel. The man she'd hit was still on the ground, groaning. Finally, they picked up their companion and retreated to their horses, which were tied up at the edge of the property. "Sullivan will hear about this," one of them shouted as they rode off. "I'm counting on it," Austin shouted back. Then he turned to the barn, which was now fully engulfed in flames. "The horses. We need to make sure they are all out." Together, they worked frantically to release the remaining horses and get them to safety. The fire was too far advanced to save the barn, but they could protect the other buildings. Miguel and Carlos arrived, roused by the commotion, and helped them form a bucket brigade from the well. They worked through the night, and by dawn, the barn was a smoking ruin, but the fire hadn't spread. As the sun rose, Lucia and Austin stood looking at the destruction, exhausted and covered in soot. Austin put an arm around Lucia's shoulders, and she leaned into him, too tired to maintain any pretense of distance. "Thank you," he said quietly. "If you hadn't warned me, that man might have killed me, and you took him down with a shovel." "I couldn't let them hurt you," Lucia said. "I couldn't lose someone else I care about." Austin turned her to face him, both arms on her shoulders now. "You care about me." Lucia looked up at him, and for once she didn't look away. "Yes," she said simply, "I care about you, more than I should probably, more than is wise." "Why isn't it wise?" "Because I'm broken, Austin. Because I have blood on my hands and nightmares in my head, and I don't know how to be normal anymore." "You're not broken," Austin said firmly. He cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones gently. "You're wounded, yes. You've been through trauma that would break most people. But you're still standing. You're still fighting. You picked up a shovel and took on a man twice your size to protect me. That's not broken, Lucia. That's incredibly strong." "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared of what I feel for you. I'm scared I'll lose you like I lost my father. I'm scared I don't deserve this, any of this." "Do you trust me?" Austin asked. Lucia thought about the question. Did she trust him? Yes, she realized, completely. "Yes," she said. "Then trust me when I tell you that you deserve every good thing life has to offer. You deserve happiness and peace and love. And if you'll let me, I'd like to be the one to give those things to you." He paused, and his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'm falling in love with you, Lucia. I think I have been since that first night I found you by the creek. You've brought light back into my life, made me remember what it's like to look forward to tomorrow. I want you to stay, not as my housekeeper, but as my partner, my companion, my wife, if you'll have me. Lucia felt tears streaming down her face. Austin, you don't have to answer now, he said quickly. I know it's too soon, that we've only known each other a few months, but I wanted you to know how I feel. And I want you to know that I see you, all of you, including the parts you think are damaged or wrong. And I love every part of what I see. Lucia was too ashamed to meet his eyes fully, even as her heart soared at his words. You shouldn't love me. You should find someone whole, someone without all this baggage. Look at me, Austin said gently. When she didn't immediately comply, he added, Please, Lucia. Slowly, she raised her eyes to his. Austin studied her face for a long moment, and what she saw in his eyes took her breath away. There was love there, yes, but also admiration and respect and something that looked like wonder. You know what I see when I look at you? He asked softly. I see a woman with eyes like amber honey that light up when she smiles. I see delicate features and soft skin and hair that shines like polished mahogany in the sunlight. I see a mouth that's perfect for kissing, though I haven't had the honor yet. A small smile tugged at his lips. But more than that, I see beauty in your courage, in your determination, in your capacity for love even after loss. I see beauty in your hands that work so hard, in your voice when you hum while you cook, in the way you care for everything around you. When I look at you, Lucia, I see only beauty. Inside and out. Lucia couldn't speak. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever looked at her the way Austin was looking at her now, as if she were something precious and rare. I don't know how to do this, she finally managed. I don't know how to be with someone, how to let myself be loved. Then we'll figure it out together, Austin said. No rush, no pressure, just one day at a time, letting whatever this is between us grow naturally. He leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to. May I kiss you? Lucia's heart was racing. She thought about all the reasons she should say no, all the ways this could end badly. But then she thought about what Rosa had said about letting herself be happy, about forgiving herself and moving forward. And she thought about how Austin had been nothing but kind and patient and understanding from the moment they'd met. Yes, she whispered. Austin's kiss was gentle, almost reverent. His lips were warm and soft, and he tasted like smoke and coffee. The kiss lasted only a moment before he pulled back, searching her face for her reaction. Lucia felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. That brief kiss had awakened something in her, a longing she'd buried deep under layers of guilt and shame. She wanted more. She wanted this. She wanted him. That was nice, she said, and then felt foolish for such an inadequate description. Austin laughed, a warm, happy sound. Yes, it was, and if you're willing, I'd very much like to do it again sometime. I'd like that too, Lucia admitted. They might have stood there longer, lost in the moment, but Miguel cleared his throat loudly from behind them. Boss, I hate to interrupt, but we need to talk about what happened here. Austin sighed and turned, keeping one arm around Lucia's waist. You're right. We need to report this to the marshal, and we need to figure out how to rebuild that barn before winter. The next few days were busy. Austin rode into town and filed a formal complaint with the marshal about the fire and Sullivan's men. The marshal, a weathered man named Tom Carter, promised to investigate, but his tone suggested he wasn't optimistic about getting any kind of justice. Sullivan had money and influence, and the men who'd set the fire would undoubtedly provide alibis for each other. Best I can do is warn Sullivan officially to leave you alone, Marshal Carter said. But between you and me, Garrett, You might want to consider hiring some extra security. Men like Sullivan don't take kindly to being told no. I'll take care of my own security, Austin replied. I just wanted this on the record. Word of the fire spread quickly through Seligman, and reactions were mixed. Some people were sympathetic, offering to help with the rebuilding. Others seemed to feel that Austin had brought it on himself by refusing to sell. And of course, there were those who used it as more fodder for gossip about Austin and his housekeeper. Lucia tried not to let the whispers bother her, but it was hard. She'd gone into town with Austin to purchase lumber and supplies for the new barn, and she'd felt the stares and heard the murmured conversations that stopped when she got too close. Just ignore them, Austin said when he noticed her discomfort. They'll find something else to talk about eventually. It bothers me that they're talking about you too, Lucia said. You've lived here your whole life. You shouldn't have to deal with gossip because of me. I told you before, I don't care what people think. The only person whose opinion matters to me is yours. He took her hand right there on the main street of Seligman, in full view of anyone watching. And I want everyone to know that I'm courting you, properly and respectfully, with intention. Lucia felt her cheeks flame, but she didn't pull her hand away. Let them talk. Austin was right. The only opinions that mattered were theirs. The barn raising was scheduled for 2 weeks after the fire. Austin had been surprised and touched when neighbors he'd barely spoken to showed up to help. Even some of Sullivan's ranch hands came, apparently disgusted by what their employer had done. Men who worked the land understood the code of the frontier. You didn't destroy another man's livelihood over a business disagreement. Lucia spent the day cooking for the workers, with Rosa's help. They prepared huge quantities of food: stew, cornbread, pies, and gallons of coffee. It was exhausting work, but Lucia found she enjoyed it. There was something deeply satisfying about feeding people who were doing honest work, about being part of a community, even if she was still something of an outsider. As the day wore on, and the barn's frame took shape, Lucia carried water out to the workers. She was handing a dipper to Carlos when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Well, if it isn't the infamous Miss Reyes. Lucia turned to find Mrs. Thompson, the gossip from the general store, standing with 2 other well-dressed women. They were apparently there to watch the proceedings, though none of them looked inclined to actually help. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Thompson," Lucia said politely, though her heart sank. She really wasn't in the mood for more veiled insults. "I must say, you've caused quite a stir in our little town," Mrs. Thompson continued. "First moving in with Austin Garrett unchaperoned, and now this fire. Some people are saying you're bad luck. And some people should mind their own business," Rosa said sharply, appearing at Lucia's side. "Miss Lucia is a good woman. She works hard, she is kind, and she makes Mr. Austin happy. If you cannot see that, then you are blind." Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened in surprise at Rosa's vehemence. "I'm sure I meant no offense." "Yes, you did," Lucia said quietly, finding her courage. "You've meant offense since the first day I met you. You've made assumptions about my character and my relationship with Austin without knowing anything about me, and I'm tired of it." "Well, I never," Mrs. Thompson began. "No, you probably never have," Lucia interrupted. She was trembling, but she kept her voice steady. "You've probably never had to make impossible choices or live through trauma that shakes you to your core. You've probably never had to start over with nothing in a place where no one knows you. You've probably never had to defend yourself or someone you love with violence because there was no other choice. So you don't get to judge me or make snide comments about my relationship with a man who's shown me nothing but kindness and respect." Mrs. Thompson looked genuinely taken aback. Her companions were staring at Lucia with open mouths. "Austin is courting me," Lucia continued, properly and respectfully. He's a good man, an honorable man, and I'm fortunate that he's chosen to spend his time with me. And if that bothers you, if my presence in this town bothers you, then I suggest you look elsewhere for entertainment because I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, Mrs. Thompson's expression shifted from shock to something that might have been respect. "You have spirit," she said finally. "I'll give you that, and perhaps I have been hasty in my judgments. Austin Garrett is indeed a good man, and if he's chosen you, then perhaps there's more to you than meets the eye." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was close enough. Mrs. Thompson and her companions moved away, and Lucia let out a shaky breath. "That was very brave," Rosa said approvingly. "You stand up for yourself, is good." "I'm tired of being afraid," Lucia said. "Tired of letting other people make me feel small. Austin has been trying to tell me that I'm stronger than I think, and maybe it's time I started believing him." That evening, after the last of the helpers had gone home and the new barn stood complete, Austin and Lucia sat on the porch watching the sunset. They'd fallen into the habit of these evening talks, and Lucia treasured them. "I heard about your conversation with Mrs. Thompson," Austin said. "Carlos told me. He said you were magnificent." Lucia laughed. "I don't know about magnificent. I was terrified the whole time, but I meant what I said. I'm tired of being afraid." "I'm proud of you," Austin said. He reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You've come so far since that first night I found you by the creek. You're not the same woman who couldn't meet my eyes." "You've helped me see myself differently," Lucia said. "You've been patient and kind, and you've never pushed me to be anything but who I am. That's given me the courage to start healing." "I'm glad," Austin said. "But you did the hard work yourself. I just provided a safe space for it to happen." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands and watching the colors change in the sky. Finally, Austin spoke again. "Lucia, I know I said you didn't have to answer my earlier question right away, but I need to know. Is there any chance you might say yes someday? To marrying me, I mean. Because if there's not, if you only see me as a friend or an employer, I need to know so I can adjust my expectations." Lucia turned to look at him, this man who'd given her so much. "There's more than a chance," she said softly. "Austin, I'm falling in love with you. I think I have been for a while now. I've been fighting it because I was afraid, because I didn't think I deserved to be happy. But I'm tired of fighting it. I'm tired of letting my past control my future." Austin's face lit up with joy. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm not ready to say yes quite yet, but I will be, soon. I just need a little more time to fully believe that this is real, that I'm worthy of this." She squeezed his hand. "Can you be patient with me a little longer?" "I'll wait as long as you need," Austin said. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "You're worth waiting for, Lucia Reyes. You're worth everything." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Lucia's life. She and Austin grew closer, spending every available moment together. They took long rides across the ranch property, with Austin teaching her to handle a horse better. They cooked together in the evenings, laughing as they bumped into each other in the now tidy kitchen. They sat up late talking about everything from philosophy to their dreams for the future. Austin courted her properly, with small gifts and sweet gestures. He brought her wildflowers from the desert. He bought her a new dress from the general store, a beautiful blue cotton that matched her eyes. He taught her to dance in the main room of the ranch house, humming a waltz as they moved together. And he kissed her often, long, sweet kisses that made Lucia's heart race and her knees weak. Each kiss helped her believe a little more that she deserved this happiness, that she could have a future that wasn't defined by her past. Sullivan, for his part, seemed to have backed off after the barn burning. Austin suspected the marshal's warning, and the community's reaction to the fire had convinced him to try a different approach. Or perhaps he was just biding his time. Either way, life was peaceful for the moment, and Lucia was grateful. November arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and preparations for winter. Lucia had been at the ranch for nearly 4 months now, and it felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever lived. She loved the routine of ranch life, loved watching the sunrise over the desert, loved the satisfaction of hard work well done. One evening in mid-November, after a particularly nice dinner, Austin suggested another walk. They bundled up against the evening chill and headed out toward the ridge that overlooked the ranch. The stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage. When they reached the top of the ridge, Austin stopped and turned to face her. "I've been thinking about what you said, about needing more time to believe this is real. Has enough time passed? Because, Lucia, I can't wait any longer to ask you properly." Before she could respond, he dropped to one knee and pulled a small box from his pocket. Opening it revealed a simple gold band with a small diamond. "Lucia Reyes, you walked into my life when I'd almost given up on finding love. You've brought joy and laughter and warmth back into my home and my heart. You're brave and strong and beautiful, and I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and my partner, and let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you've made me?" Lucia looked down at Austin, this good man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. She thought about the journey she'd been on, from that desperate night by the creek to this moment. She thought about how he'd lifted her face when she was too ashamed to meet his eyes and told her he saw only beauty there. She thought about how he'd been patient and kind and never pushed her to be anything but herself. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Yes, Austin, I'll marry you." Austin's whoop of joy echoed across the desert as he stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Lucia kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and hope that filled her heart. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. "How did you know my size?" Lucia asked, admiring the way the diamond caught the starlight. "I measured your finger while you were sleeping one night," Austin admitted with a sheepish grin. "I've been carrying this ring around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." "This is perfect," Lucia said. "You're perfect." "I'm far from perfect," Austin said, "but I promise to love you perfectly for the rest of our lives." They were married 3 weeks later on a crisp December morning. Marshal Carter presided over the ceremony, which was held at the ranch with Miguel, Rosa, and Carlos in attendance. Lucia wore a new dress that Austin had commissioned from the seamstress in town, a beautiful cream-colored gown with lace at the collar and cuffs. Austin wore his best suit, and he couldn't stop smiling the entire ceremony. Mrs. Thompson and several other townspeople showed up uninvited but were welcomed warmly by Austin. Apparently, word had spread about the wedding, and despite the short notice, people were curious to see Austin Garrett finally settle down. As Lucia spoke her vows, she looked into Austin's eyes and felt a peace she'd never thought she'd experience. The shame and guilt that had weighed on her for so long had finally lifted. She'd forgiven herself with Austin's help and was ready to embrace this new chapter of her life. After the ceremony, Rosa and some of the other women had prepared a feast. There was roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables from various gardens, and several pies. Someone had even brought a cake, decorated with white icing and small flowers. Music played and people danced in the main room of the ranch house that Lucia had worked so hard to restore. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Austin took Lucia's hand and led her to the bedroom they would now share. He'd spent the day before moving her things from the small guest room, and she'd been touched to find wildflowers in a vase on the dresser and new curtains on the windows. "Are you nervous?" Austin asked gently as they stood facing each other in the lamplight. "A little," Lucia admitted, "but mostly I'm happy, happier than I ever thought I could be." Austin cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks tenderly. "We'll take this slow. There's no rush. We have the rest of our lives." What followed was tender and sweet, Austin showing her with gentle touches and whispered words how much he loved her. Lucia had been afraid that the violence of her past would make intimacy difficult, but Austin's patience and care made it beautiful instead. He worshipped her body like something precious, and Lucia found herself responding with a passion she hadn't known she possessed. Afterwards, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Lucia felt tears on her cheeks. But these were tears of joy, of relief, of gratitude for second chances and new beginnings. "Are you all right?" Austin asked, concern in his voice. "I'm perfect," Lucia said. "For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Life as Mrs. Garrett was everything Lucia had hoped for and more. She and Austin fell into an easy rhythm, working together to maintain the ranch and build their life. The winter was mild, and they spent cozy evenings by the fire, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's presence. In January, Sullivan made one last attempt to buy the ranch, sending a lawyer to Austin with an even more generous offer. Austin refused firmly, making it clear that no amount of money would change his mind. The lawyer left looking defeated, and Sullivan apparently finally accepted that the Garrett ranch would never be his. Spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle calved successfully, and Austin was able to sell several head at good prices. The garden that Lucia had reclaimed from the weeds burst into bloom, providing fresh vegetables for their table. And in April, Lucia discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected it for a few weeks, but had been afraid to say anything, worried that something might go wrong. When she finally told Austin, his joy was boundless. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing and kissing her until she was dizzy. "We're going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "We're going to be parents." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Lucia was often tired and occasionally sick. Austin was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly asking if she was all right and insisting she rest more. Rosa came by often to check on her and share wisdom from her own experiences raising 5 children. "You will be good mother," Rosa assured her. "You have so much love to give." "I hope so," Lucia said. "I want to give this child everything I didn't have growing up. Security, love, a home that's truly safe." "You will," Rosa said confidently. "You and Mr. Austin, you will give this baby everything it needs and more." In December, a year to the day after their wedding, Lucia went into labor. The birth was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Rosa attended her, along with the doctor from town that Austin had frantically summoned. Austin paced outside the bedroom door, terrified and helpless, praying for Lucia's safety. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, Lucia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The doctor wrapped the infant in a clean blanket and handed him to Austin. "Congratulations, you have a son." Austin looked down at the tiny face, the eyes that were already trying to focus, the small fist waving in the air. He felt his heart expand with a love so fierce it almost hurt. This was his son, his and Lucia's, a physical manifestation of their love. He carried the baby to Lucia, who was exhausted but smiling. "Look what we made," he said softly, placing the infant in her arms. Lucia gazed down at her son and tears streamed down her face. "He's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Austin asked. They discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Lucia knew exactly what his name should be. "Daniel," she said. "After my father, Daniel James Garrett." "Daniel James Garrett," Austin repeated. "I like it. It's strong and solid, just like he'll grow up to be." He kissed Lucia's forehead. "You were so brave. I'm so proud of you." "We did it," Lucia said. "We made a family." Life with a newborn was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Daniel was a good baby, sleeping reasonably well and rarely fussing without cause. Lucia threw herself into motherhood with the same dedication she brought to everything else, determined to be the best mother possible. Austin was a devoted father, helping with nighttime feedings and diaper changes without complaint. He would walk Daniel around the house when the baby was fussy, singing old cowboy songs in his deep voice. And he looked at Lucia with such love and admiration that it made her heart ache in the best way possible. "You're amazing with him," Austin told her one evening as she nursed Daniel. "A natural mother." "I'm terrified most of the time," Lucia admitted. "Afraid I'll do something wrong, that I'll somehow mess this up." "All parents feel that way," Austin assured her. "But look at him. He's healthy and happy and loved. You're doing everything right." As Daniel grew, he became the center of their world. He had Austin's blue eyes and Lucia's dark hair, and he was curious about everything. The ranch became his playground, and he was equally at home in the barn with the horses or in the kitchen watching his mother bake. Miguel and Rosa doted on him like grandparents, and Carlos taught him to ride when he was old enough. The boy who'd been conceived in love and born into a home filled with warmth and security grew into a happy, confident child. When Daniel was 3, Lucia discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she gave birth to twin girls, Sophia and Isabel, who were identical except for a small birthmark on Isabel's left shoulder. The girls were more challenging than Daniel had been, tag-teaming their parents with their needs and keeping everyone perpetually exhausted. But they were also a double dose of joy, filling the ranch house with laughter and love. As the years passed, the Garrett ranch prospered. Austin expanded the herd and bought additional land when a neighbor retired and moved east. Sullivan had died of a heart attack, and his empire had been divided among his children, who had no interest in feuding with Austin. The threat that had once loomed over them was gone, replaced by peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. Lucia blossomed in her role as wife, mother, and ranch co-owner. The shy, ashamed woman who'd arrived in Seligman so many years ago was gone, replaced by someone confident and secure. She was active in the community, helping organize school events and church functions. The women who'd once gossiped about her became friends, drawn to her warmth and genuine kindness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Austin took Lucia back to the ridge where he'd proposed. They stood watching the sunset, just as they had that night, but now with a decade of shared memories behind them. "Do you remember what you said when I asked you to marry me?" Austin asked, his arm around her waist. "I said yes," Lucia replied with a smile. "Before that, when you were still struggling to believe you deserved happiness. Do you still feel that way?" Lucia thought about the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I've learned that happiness isn't something you earn or deserve. It's something you accept when it's offered and work to maintain. And I've learned to forgive myself for my past. What happened in Texas will always be part of my story, but it doesn't define me anymore." "I'm glad," Austin said, "because you deserve every bit of happiness you have and more. You've made me happier than I ever imagined possible. You've given me children, a true home, and a love I'll treasure until my last breath. And you," Lucia said, turning to face him, "saw me when I couldn't see myself. You lifted my face when I was too ashamed to meet your eyes, and you saw beauty where I saw only failure and shame. You saved me, Austin, in every way a person can be saved. We saved each other, Austin corrected. I was just going through the motions before you came along. You reminded me what it means to truly live. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. And as they walked back to the ranch house, hand in hand, they could hear their children's laughter drifting on the evening breeze. The years continued to pass in a happy blur. Daniel grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Sophia and Isabel were inseparable, though their personalities were quite different. Sophia was bold and adventurous, always getting into mischief, while Isabel was quieter and more thoughtful, preferring books to outdoor adventures. When Lucia was 42, she gave birth to one more child, a surprise baby that neither she nor Austin had expected. This time it was another boy, whom they named Joshua. He was a sweet-tempered child who seemed to bring out the protective instincts in his older siblings. On Joshua's 5th birthday, the whole family gathered on the porch for a photograph. A traveling photographer had come through Seligman offering his services, and Austin had jumped at the chance to capture his family as they were in that moment. As they posed for the picture, Lucia looked around at the faces of the people she loved most in the world. Austin, now 55 but still strong and handsome, his arm around her shoulders. Daniel, 21 and already courting a girl from town. The twins, 18 and on the cusp of adulthood. And little Joshua, bouncing with excitement about the cake waiting inside. "Smile," the photographer called, and they all did, genuine smiles of contentment and love. After the photograph was taken and the birthday celebration was in full swing, Lucia found a quiet moment alone with Austin in the kitchen. "Can you believe how blessed we are?" she asked, watching through the window as their children played in the yard. "Every single day," Austin replied. "Sometimes I think back to that night I found you by the creek, and I can't believe how one chance encounter changed my entire life." "It wasn't chance," Lucia said. "It was fate. It was meant to be. You were meant to find me, and I was meant to find you. We were meant to build this life together." "I love you," Austin said, pulling her close. "Just as much now as I did that night on the ridge. More, maybe, because now I've had the privilege of walking through life with you for all these years." "I love you too," Lucia said. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for being patient when I was afraid. Thank you for this life, this family, this happiness." They stood together in the kitchen, holding each other as laughter and music drifted in from the other room. Outside, the Arizona sun shone down on the Garrett ranch, on the land that had been Austin's inheritance and had become their shared legacy. The barn they'd rebuilt together stood strong, the cattle grazed peacefully, and the desert stretched out in all directions, beautiful and unforgiving and home. Lucia thought about the scared young woman she'd been when she first arrived in Seligman, ashamed and alone, certain she didn't deserve anything good, and she marveled at how wrong she'd been. Life had given her a second chance in the form of a rancher with kind eyes and a generous heart. Austin had lifted her face and seen beauty there when she'd seen only shame. He'd loved her through her healing and built a life with her that was more wonderful than anything she'd ever dreamed. She had found her home, her purpose, her family. She had found love that was patient and kind and true. And most importantly, she had found herself again, the person she was always meant to be, beneath the trauma and fear. As they rejoined their children for the birthday celebration, Lucia sent up a silent prayer of gratitude, for second chances, for new beginnings, for a man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, for the family they'd created together, For every moment of joy and love that filled their days, the future stretched before them, unknown but no longer frightening. Whatever came, they would face it together, hand in hand, heart to heart, just as they always had. The Garrett Ranch would continue to thrive, passed down through generations, a testament to the love story that had begun one desperate night by a creek and had grown into something beautiful and lasting. And years later, when their children were grown with families of their own, when Austin and Lucia sat on that same porch watching their grandchildren play, they would look at each other and know that every hardship, every challenge, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Because it had led them here, to this life, to each other, to a love that had stood the test of time and would endure beyond their last breaths. Lucia Garrett née Reyes had come to Seligman, Arizona Territory in 1876, believing herself unworthy of happiness. She had learned, with Austin's patient love, that she deserved every good thing life had to offer. And in learning to see herself through his eyes, she had discovered a truth that would carry her through the rest of her days. That beauty isn't just what you look like on the outside, but who you are on the inside. And that the truest kind of love is the kind that sees you at your worst and loves you anyway. The kind that lifts your face when you're too ashamed to look up and shows you that you are worthy, you are beautiful, and you are loved, exactly as you are.